My father used to say to me, it was something he had read or heard, and he thought it was profound, and it is, I think. Young men see visions, and old men dream dreams. The enthusiasm of youth makes you have a vision of what may lie ahead. You may be able to make $1 million, become president of the United States, even though you have an orange hairpiece. But old men have dreams of the past and dreams maybe of what the world is or could be. Old men dream dreams. I have dreams that are recurrent, not all the time, but I have one of a house. It not a house that I've ever lived in. I was close to it with one house where I lived with this lady, this Yankee lady. But always, I've always thought that it was a dream house. You know, it's 2 story, and I'm in the upstairs, and we're going through from one part to another like an annex. And the city is outside, and it's chaotic or beautiful or whatever, but it's out there. And I think of a dream that my father had when he was in Africa. He said that he saw his father playing the violin. My grandpa, Lewis, for whom I'm named, did play the fiddle. He's an amateur violinist. And he said that Grandpa was singing, "Oh, think of the home over there." And it's about heaven, you know. "Oh, think of the home over there where the saints all something and fair." You know, it was, Dad was away from home and he was feeling homesick, I guess. And for him, I guess, home would be the one place where he could finally lay down and rest and take it easy. Heaven. For me, I'm kind of happy here in Montreal, in my house, with my dog, and so yeah. My father was Henry, the youngest boy of 5 in a family of 10 children, 5 boys, 5 girls. His father and mother had homesteaded in northwest Fisher County, Texas, raising cotton and cattle. Mother was born in Greenville, Texas, or actually Peniel, just outside of Greenville, in East Texas, northeast of Dallas. Her mother took her to the college town in Oklahoma, Bethany, where she met my father and they married. My father, studying to be a preacher, had gone there in 1932 in the Depression. And mother had dropped out of college after the 3rd year to be a secretary. She was good with her fingers. Greg stenography and the piano and the accordion. And they became a pastor and wife team. I was born in their first church, Watonga, Oklahoma. We moved within a year to western Oklahoma and then to Kansas, and then we went to Africa as they were missionaries. Dad was put in charge of the farm in the main Nazarene property that was overlooking Bremersdorp, the biggest town in the Kingdom of Swaziland. And mother was expert in Zulu and played the piano for church. Then they were sent to Johannesburg to start a church among the colored people of that area, the mixed race people who were descended from people who were father or mother was white, the other was black. And he built that church, and mother played the piano there. He was a preacher until that ran out. Essentially what happened was it could not support the family. They small churches, so they didn't have money. And he became a teacher and counselor, and mother was a legal secretary again. When I was in South Africa, I had actually begun the first grade in West Texas just before we left. We left, I think, in the late fall of 1946, I believe. I'm not sure. I don't know how I could verify that now. But when I really entered the first grade, which was Standard 1 or Form 1, I went to the white school in Burmersdorp. And from the mission station, I was taken by a bus, small bus, to the white school. There were completely separate schools all through South Africa, for whites, for coloreds, and for blacks, for native peoples. The principal of my school was a man named Mr. Wust, a W with an umlaut UST. And he was, I guess, an Afrikaner, but he taught half the subjects in English and half in Afrikaans. So I learned Afrikaans pretty quickly, and I learned Swazi by listening to people talking around me. I have started, well, I've now pretty well completed writing a book about my years in South Africa, and then how I went back to those places and tried to write about what I saw and how that had changed. When I was there, the nationalist government had just put in place with power, they won the big election in 1948. There were no black voters. Their slogan was, and this is in Afrikaans, Die wit man moet altyd baas wees. The white man must always be boss. You could hear the English behind the Dutch and English amalgam or fusion, which is Afrikaans. Then, after many years, and Mandela in jail, then released, they won, they got the vote, all the people got the vote. They won the election. Now there's a black government, and there has been since 1992. So I'm trying to explain, or through stories, show how the work that my father and his cohorts, the missionaries, did helped to make apartheid unstable so that it could be ended. The title that I have tentatively chosen is one that I've got to work on some more, because here it is, and the first word is a slang word, and it's a word that many people don't know. It was a taboo word. The word is voetsek. It's spelled Voetsek, or AK, and it means get out of here. It comes from the Dutch originally, voort sek ek, fourth say I. It sounds like the word foot sack. There used to be, a lot of places, a foot race where the people who were running had to put their both feet in a sack and then try to run. So they couldn't run very fast. Voetsek is a word that you would say to a dog that was snapping at your heels, or to a black person. It was a terrible insult. You were calling the man a dog. So my title was going to be, or is, well, it is now, but I have to work on it. Voetsek apartheid, get out of here apartheid. Revisiting my early years in Swaziland and Soweto. I have had to notice and have it dramatically demonstrated in what I saw in both places where I grew up in the American South and in South Africa, at the amazing similarities of those places. When my father had built his church and had his congregation together, there were maybe 40 people, he invited them to come for a picnic to our backyard. It was just over the line in the White Township, and the government had just passed a law that said that in order for a person who was not white to be there, they had to show a pass that said, I'm working in somebody's house. We lived across the street from an Afrikaner family, and the young man in that family was surprised and unhappy, angry that all these brown people had come into the township without a pass, and they were there drinking Kool-Aid and eating cookies and talking and having a nice sunny afternoon. And he backed his car out, and he spun the wheels as he backed out in the gravel, and his little sister was right beside the car, and I saw her tumble away from the wheel in his anger. And my father's people, shocked at this spontaneous outburst in their happy afternoon, fell silent and went into the house one by one and sat there, and mother started to play the piano. And then the mother from next door brought the little girl who was unharmed and held her in her arms while we sang to her. That's the first story I wrote. Now here's a comparison with the American South. I have a favorite black blues singer who's from Dallas, where I graduated from high school in 1956. The name that he's known by is Leadbelly. I forget his real name. He was sent to prison for life for having a joint. And he got out of prison because Pete Seeger from the Northeast came down and got him out because it was an unjust sentence. It was violence against blacks, undue punishment. I don't know, that's not an exact analogy between the overt, angry, intemperate, youthful violence that I saw. Oh my! Oh, I got a story for you. When my brother Steve was just underage to buy a little bottle of liquor for the weekend, he had a habit of going into Dallas and meeting an old black man who would go in and for a quarter or a buck would go in and buy him a little bottle. And they did this every week. And one weekend, Steve asked the old man, well, he said, I'm grateful for you doing this for me. What are you going to do on the weekend? What do you do for fun? And this is what the man said to my brother. He said, white boy, if you was ever a black man on Saturday night, you'd never want to be a white boy again. My father went 2/3 of the way around the world to a place that was very like where he grew up. When I use terms that have to do with race, I sometimes perhaps should be careful to define them. In South Africa, there was a racially based distinction. I remember, for example, that the post office had separate entrances for European, they called it, and non-European. And European basically meant white. But one of the things I found very odd, even then, I knew very little about the Great World, was that Chinese people were considered European and Indian people were considered non-European. In terms of rules of conduct, you had to go in by this door or that. And I remember Dad took me one time to it was a place of recreation. It had an enormous, shallow place to cool off in the heat. It was a pool with nice clear water, and there were only white people there. I've since then found a newspaper illustration of signs on beaches in Durban that said whites only. I have to mention one big moment in my returns to South Africa that's going to be definitely in the book. I was on my second trip. I went for a month each in 2012, 2013, 2014, always in November when the spring was there and summer was coming and it was beginning to be winter here. And it was in the second trip, maybe a week in, and I suddenly had this flash, this truth, that the normal color of a human being on this planet is not the color I am, but brown. But who are the great figures of world power that we think of? Well, there's Theodore Roosevelt, and there's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and there's Winston Churchill, and there's Angela Merkel, and Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump. And who are the people who are opposing them who tried to change the world to redress the balance? Nelson Mandela, brown. Mahatma Gandhi, brown. Martin Luther King, shot dead. I have a dream, he said. Sons of Pullman porters and the sons of engineers ride their father's magic carpet made of steel. Don't you know me? I'm your native son. I'm the train they call the city of New Orleans. And I'll be gone 500 miles when the day is done.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.